Hello, peoples and persons. Welcome back to Dante's Derivatives. Today I'm going to be coding this graphing tool that you see right here. Right now it's graphing y is equal to x. Now it's graphing y is equal to x squared. And now it's graphing negative x squared, a downward facing parabola. Now let's go ahead and code this out in Python. So we got our graphing tool here. The first thing we want to do when coding this is like this video so that way you can see more of my content and you'll get to learn more with me. And the second thing we want to do is download this and install this processing graphics library. It's a programming environment / graphics library that it's compatible with Python, and you can draw stuff or code stuff in it and make pretty cool pictures, but I'm using it to do some math. We're going to use it to draw our graphing tool. All right, so let's go ahead and set and calculate the x and y range of our graphing tool over here. As you can see from the graphing tool, our minimum x value will be -10, and our positive x value will be +10. And our minimum y value will be -10, and our positive y value, the greatest y value, will be +10. Now the range will be the range of our x values will be the x max minus the x min. And the range of our y values will be the y max minus the y min. Okay, and as you can see, it kind of makes sense. You know, we got -10 over here. Here's 0, and going all the way to +10. Same thing here, -10, 0, +10. So that's the range of our graph here. Now let's look at this setup function. This function sets up the graphing window. This is the setup function. It sets up the size of the graphing window, and we'll also give our x and y scales in there. So we'll define two global variables, x scale and y scale, and the size of our graphing window will be 1400 by 1400 pixels, and we're going to go ahead and define our x and y scale, the x scale factor and the y scale factor. The x scale will be width divided by the range of our x. That's the x max minus x min. And the y scale factor will be the height divided by the range of our y, which will be y max minus y min. Let's look at this draw function here. This function draws out the graphics we want to see on screen. Now we'll go ahead and call those same two global variables, x scale and y scale, because we're going to need those to draw anything on this graphic screen. We'll go ahead and set the background color to 0. And what this 0 actually means is there's 0 color, because this runs off of RGB values. Go on Google or any of your preferred search engines and look up the RGB values. You'll see that black is actually just the absence of color. So it'll be the red will be 0. The green will be 0, and the blue will be 0 as well. So you'll just put a 0 in there. And that's the background color. We'll set it to black. When we put this translate in here, we're going to translate width divided by 2 and height divided by 2. Now, what this is, look at this graph here. We're setting the origin. We're setting the origin to our graph right here. When we started, this was the origin of our graph until we translated, the origin of our graph to the middle of the screen. We're translating the width and the height, dividing it by 2. And so that moves the origin of our graph to 0, 0. And then we're going to call two functions that we haven't written yet, but we're going to further down in our code. The first one will be grid, and it'll have two factors in it, the x scale and the y scale, or it'll have two parameters, the x scale factor and the y scale factor that we said earlier. And the second function that we're going to call is the graph function. Now this function, this is where we plug in our numbers. Right now, when I pull up my graphic screen, it's returning nothing because I have returned 0. But if I put x in there, it would be a line. Y is equal to x, it would be a line going up there. If I set the function equal to x squared, it will be a parabola. If we're coding everything correctly, it'll be a parabola at the end. So let's go ahead and set this to x squared. excuse my cursor there, x squared. We're going to return x squared. Now let's go ahead and define those two functions from earlier that we were writing in our draw function. This first one is the graph function. This is going to draw the line of the function that we want to have on our screen. So we're going to first define a variable, x is equal to x min, so that's -10. And we're going to have a while loop in here and set this conditional while x is less than or equal to x max, which is +10, and it's going to go up to including +10. We're going to fill the line, put a 0 in there so you can actually see the line that you're drawing. And this is where it gets a little tough, a little mathy, okay? So for our line in Python, we need 4 points. The first and second point, they will be the first points of our x and y locations. So the first part will be x, which would be -10. That's the first part we're going to check on our while loop. And we're going to times that by the x scale factor. And the second point will be the first point of the y, which is f of x times y scale. The third and fourth points of our line will be, we're just going to increment by 0.1. So x plus 0.1 times x scale. This is a little confusing. Just type in exactly what I have here. And the last point will be f of x plus 0.1 times y scale. Now this x scale and y scale, we have to scale all of our x and y values down so that way they'll fit on the screen. And this last part, we're incrementing our x values by 0.1 so that way it's a clear parabola. It's not just a bunch of points, but this is us fitting our line. This is us, fitting our curve so that way it's not a bunch of points on a graph. We want an actual line. Now let's go ahead and write our grid. This is the green grid squares that you saw in our graph. This is actually the most confusing part of our graph, but we're going to go ahead and we're going to learn this together. So this grid function here takes two parameters, our x scale and our y scale. This draws the green grid lines onto our graphing tool. Now we want the stroke weight, we're going to set it to 2 so that way we can see it. The stroke color will be 255. It will be 0 red, 255 or maximum green, and 0 blue. So we're going to use 2 for loops to draw our grid lines. We're going to need grid lines going in the horizontal direction and in the vertical direction. So the first one will be the for I in range, x min to x max plus 1. So that way we're actually drawing a line in both directions from the x min to x max plus 1. And our line will actually continue to go, it'll draw a point for each value in our for loop. So I times x scale, y min times y scale. That's our first and second point. Our third and fourth points will be I times x scale and y max times y scale. And this one's going to draw our vertical lines from y min to y max plus 1. And you can go ahead and look at this yourself so that way you can read it out loud yourself and try and learn it. But just remember that this confusing code drew our green grid square. So all those green lines that were going in the horizontal and vertical directions, you'll know what I'm talking about when we pull up our function. And this last part, we're going to include this for the yellow axis lines, the yellow x and y axis lines in the middle of our graphing tool. So the stroke weight, we'll set it to 4 so that way we can see it on top of our grid lines. The stroke, I want it to be yellow because black, green, and yellow, you can see all those colors on top of each other. So 255 red, 255 green, and 0 blue, and that's going to give you yellow. So our line is we're going to have 2 lines here. First one's going to be at 0, y min times y scale, 0, y max times y scale. That's going to give us our vertical. And this line's going to give us our horizontal x, our x axis. So x min times x scale, 0, x max times x scale 0. And these are just 4 points on the line. Just remember that. So now we've actually written everything we need. So let's see if we've actually graphed x squared. All right, so this graph is a parabola, okay? But is this actually x squared that we've graphed here, or is this negative x squared? Now what we can do is go up to our draw portion where we defined our x and y scale factors. And what we're going to want to do here, when we look at our function, this is upside down. We want x squared like we were trying to call. This is upside down x squared, or negative x squared. Okay, so we're going to negate this. So we're going to negate this height. And now, when we call our graphing tool again, we'll see that we have graphed f of x is equal to x squared. And that's pretty cool. We have an upward facing parabola. Let's try and see if we can graph y is equal to x like we were doing before. Make sure it still works. Looks like we have a functioning graphing tool. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Go ahead and plug in some other numbers here. Like you can put in x cubed and see what that looks like on our graph. Play with these numbers, like the video, and leave me a comment and tell me where you're studying from. Thank you guys so much for watching. Have a great day. And I almost forgot to slowly go through this code so you can see it. So I'll slowly go through it. This is all the code we need. And remember, I'm left in a cubic function. So this is all the code we need to graph a cubic function. You guys have a great day.